What if a single spark could set the world ablaze? What if that spark was the Russia-Ukraine war? Let's journey back to the origin of this conflict, where the seed of discord was sown in the fertile soil of history. Russia and Ukraine, two neighboring nations, have always been entwined in a complex dance of power. This dance took a dramatic turn in 2014, when Russia, in a contentious move, annexed Crimea. This bold act sent shockwaves across the globe, stirring political unrest and escalating tensions. The world watched as alliances shifted and allegiances were tested. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, found itself thrust into the spotlight. This alliance of 29 North American and European countries was founded on the principle of collective defense. Their involvement in the Russia-Ukraine situation was inevitable, as their core belief is the protection of freedom and security. Yet, as the world watched, the dance between Russia and Ukraine intensified, and the tension grew. The stage was set, and the world started to feel the heat. But what was the tinder that truly ignited this conflict? The spark had ignited, and the flames of war began to spread. But what fueled this escalation? The conflict was not contained within the borders of Ukraine. It seeped across the globe, challenging the world's status quo. When Russia launched its military intervention, the world was not silent. The United States, European Union, United Kingdom, and Canada imposed sanctions targeting Russia's top brass, marking a significant escalation in efforts to impose economic penalties on Russia. Meanwhile, China, though expressing concerns about the conflict spiraling out of control, strengthened its ties with Moscow, adding another layer of complexity to the situation. As the conflict grew, the global community felt the tremors. The imposition of sanctions and the disruption of trade routes led to an economic ripple effect. The world's economies, still reeling from global crises, had to adapt to a new set of challenges. On the battlefield, the war was ruthless. Reports emerged of Russian forces conducting horrifying acts in Kherson and other occupied areas in Ukraine. The human cost was tragically high, and the world watched in shock and disbelief. As the war escalated, the world began to feel the ripple effects. But what were these impacts? When a fire rages, the smoke can be seen from miles away, and the Russia-Ukraine war was no different. The conflict didn't just echo within the borders of these two nations, it reverberated around the globe, shaking the very foundations of our interconnected world. The economic tremors were felt almost instantly. Sanctions imposed on Russia led to a surge of trade deficits. Countries once heavily reliant on Russian exports found themselves scrambling to fill the void. As a result, prices soared, affecting household economies from London to Los Angeles, from Sydney to Sao Paulo. But the economic aftershocks didn't stop there. The war disrupted global supply chains, causing ripples in the international market, a testament to our global interdependence. The war also reshaped the world's political landscape. Alliances were tested as nations chose sides, while others strived for neutrality. The conflict sparked intense conversations about national security, sovereignty, and the limits of international diplomacy. But perhaps the most heart-wrenching impact was the humanitarian crisis. Lives were lost, families torn apart, and millions displaced. The world watched as cities turned into war zones, as people fled their homes, seeking refuge in a world that seemed to be tearing at the seams. The fire of war had changed the world, but where do we stand today? In the aftermath of a fire, the landscape is forever changed. So what is the current status of the Russia-Ukraine war? The conflict has escalated to a point where the world's major powers are taking significant actions. The United States, European Union, United Kingdom, and Canada have imposed sanctions on Russian President Vladimir Putin and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, marking a significant escalation in efforts to impose economic penalties on Russia. These sanctions include travel bans, asset freezes, debt and equity restrictions, and technology access limitations. Meanwhile, China, another global heavyweight, has expressed concerns about the Ukraine conflict spiraling out of control. There have been calls to shut Russia out of the SWIFT financial messaging system, but European countries are not yet ready to take that step. On the battlefield, Ukraine continues to resist, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky counting on international support for Ukraine's own peace formula. There's a belief that more Ukrainian victories on the battlefield are necessary for real peace talks to happen, and Ukraine needs more military assistance to end the war. However, the war's scars run deep. The city of Kherson in Ukraine, occupied by Russian forces from March to November 2022, saw detainees subjected to torture and abuse. The goal of these detention centers was to extinguish Ukrainian identity and eliminate resistance to the occupation. Investigations continue to uncover more evidence of Russian war crimes. The fire of the Russia-Ukraine war continues to burn, affecting not just the countries involved, but the entire world. As we continue to watch the situation unfold, we must remember the spark that started it all. The Russia-Ukraine war, a conflict that started with a spark and became a global blaze. We have traversed the timeline of this conflict, from its ignition point to the escalation that has gripped the world. We've explored the worldwide reverberations, including trade deficits and economic shifts. The current situation remains tense as nations around the globe await the outcome of this devastating conflict. As we watch the flames of this conflict, we must strive to understand its origins, its impacts, and most importantly, its lessons